Do you see the white hare standing still for a moment? There are footprints there underneath the earth. Ostara is sleeping, and the Lord of the wood is waiting. Ostara, the goddess of the dawn, sleeps the winter long deep within the earth, resting and waiting for her moment to arrive. And while she sleeps, one group of animals above all the others keep watch. With startled eyes, long rounded ears, disguised in the browning grass, the hares stand vigil. They are her guardians, her connection to the turning year. Together they gaze at the moon and the sun. They monitor the cycling of the heavens. And when they see the sun begin to turn her face towards the earth once more, they know it is time to begin their dance. A dance of power, a dance of duty, a dance that heralds the end of winter and raises Ostara from her loamy bed. And as Ostara wakes, so does the land. Where she walks, new life springs forth. The muted palette of winter gives way to vibrant green, and she eases the passing of winter. When Njord prepares to take on the mantle of summer, Ostara retires, returns to the earth where she sleeps once more, until the dancing of the hares. Now I know what you're thinking. All this sounds well and good, but what about those years when it feels like spring will never come? Well, it turns out that Ostara, despite being the goddess of the dawn, was not really a morning person. And so in those years when spring is being a little fickle, you can be certain that Ostara is still in her bed, the duvet pulled over her head, and she's wishing those hares had a snooze button. Well, it was in one such year, when Ostara was very late to emerge. And as she began her procession, she realized that the land had been in winter's grip for far too long. Snow and ice stubbornly refused to melt, and all life hung suffering in a never-ending winter. As Ostara prepared herself for the task ahead, she came upon a sparrow. Poor, poor fragile sparrow. A hen bird. She had misjudged the weather of the turbulent season, and she had succumbed to cold and hunger. She lay on the ice, half dead. Ostara was drawn to her suffering, and with a softness that only a mother can possess, she reached down and lifted that poor bird from the ice. It lay limp in her hands, its terrified eyes the only sign of life within. And so Ostara lifted the bird to her lips, and she blew warmth, new life into it. She blew away the shadow of death. And in an instant, that little sparrow revived in her hands, looked as good as it had ever been. And it broke into a song, a sweet, clear, resonant song. And as it sang, a warm breeze began to stir. Ostara smiled. An unintentional bond had been created. The little bird, sharing Ostara's breath, now shared some of her power, some of her immortality. And so the two of them quickly ushered in that spring, and then the next, and then the next. The two became inseparable. Together they began to share responsibility for the spring. As Ostara would revive the land, the little bird would sing its song and call upon the southern winds that would carry the once great flocks home to roost, home to breed. Ostara and the sparrow continued to bring in the spring each year. The centuries passed, and then one year they came across a new member of the Hare clan, but he was unlike any hare they had seen before. All of the other hares were nervous, lean and flighty creatures, but not this great Jack hare. This Jack was strong, fearless. He would never cower before the fox, certainly never run from the falcon. Ostara was used to the other hares bowing before her when she came close, but not this Jack. He stood tall and proud, confident in his own magnificence, and Ostara was forced to smile at his posturing. But the Jack hare was anything but confident. When the Jack hare looked at the sparrow that sat on Ostara's shoulder, well, his heart would begin to flutter. He was taken by that bird, and in no small way. He just knew beyond doubt that somehow, some way, he would make that bird his wife. Eventually, he couldn't contain it any longer, and desperate to gain the attention of the sparrow, he broke into the most incredible of dances. Oh, it was a dance filled with passion, filled with longing, surrender and total abandon. His feet carried him swiftly across the ground, lifting him high into the air, a whirling display of unspeakable love. But the whole time, he kept his eyes fixed on that little bird. Well, Ostara laughed at his frenzied display until she noticed the bird. Ostara watched as the bird seemed transfixed by the Jack hare. She moved. Her head would bob and swing. Her wings would extend slightly as she echoed every move that the Jack made. She was lost to the dance and at one with the Jack. Well, with a dread born of jealousy, Ostara stepped forward and she brought the dance to an end, but too late. The little sparrow flew down onto the ground beside the Jack, and she began to sing a different song. A song filled with love. A song filled with such heartfelt truth and honesty that Ostara's own heart began to break. Knowing the mind and the heart of her companion, Ostara knew what she must do. She would give the bird a gift that only Ostara could give. She knelt down onto the ground and placed a gentle kiss on the bird's head. As Ostara stood, a great cloud of feathers blew around them, and as the feathers parted, where the little bird had been stood, now there stood a great she-hare, equal to the Jack in every way. The following year, when the hares began their dance, Ostara awoke with sadness in her heart. She was alone again, as she had been before, except this time she knew what she was missing. When finally she began to walk the land, her passing did not usher in the spring. The muted greys and browns of winter refused to turn green. The land was frost-baked hard, and the air thin and sharp. Ostara seemed not to care. Her thoughts were turned inwards, cradling the sense of pain and loss in her heart. She was not part of our world. Nothing seemed to hold any joy for her. In fact, it was not until she tripped over a great gathering of hares that she came to her senses and began to take in the scene that was unfolding around her. As she looked out over the fields, it seemed as if every hare in the world had come out in celebration. They had formed great big circles, one circle inside the next, and they were dancing, each circle moving in the opposite direction to its neighbours. And when the hares saw Ostara, well, they quickly reassembled themselves to form a great avenue that led to the middle of the circle. As Ostara walked down that circle, each of the hares bowed their heads. And when Ostara came to the middle, well, there was the great Jack hare and the she hare, and they were beaming with parental pride beside a nest of feathers and sticks. Well, Ostara looked into the nest, and there were 6 hair-sized eggs. She cast a quizzical glance to her old friend, but her friend just smiled in reply. And then, as Ostara looked back to the nest, she saw one egg begin to tremble. It began to rock backwards and forwards, until eventually it began to roll its way around the nest. With growing anticipation, the hares and Ostara watched on as the egg began to split, fracture, and crack. And as the shell fell apart, there inside was a crumpled newborn hare, perfectly white from the end of its nose to the tip of its tail. Ostara smiled as another egg and then another showed signs of movement. She placed her hands into the soft feathers of the nest, and the newborn leveret half jumped but mostly stumbled on unfamiliar feet into her hands. She lifted that leveret to her face, felt its soft fur caress her cheek, and she broke into laughter. In that moment, the pain in her heart melted, and she led the hares in a new dance, a dance of liberation and a dance of rebirth. Nature felt her love rekindle, and with every step and turn she made, the grass would flush green, the sap in the trees began to rise, and the flowers felt safe to emerge. Do you see the white hare standing still for a moment? There are footprints there underneath the earth. Ostara is rising. Feel Ostara rising. See Ostara rise. Ban-dun-da-da-da, ban-dun-da-da, ban-dun-da-da-da-da. And the Lord Yes, the Lord